Jon Kiper. Welcome to the Jon Kiper Show. I'm here with my guest slash co-host Steve, back again.
Is it Facebook official yet? Like, did you poke me? How does this work? How do we get the invite here? I guess I'm just the guy that's available to come in and chat with you about the subject matters that are important to New Hampshire, the U.S., New England in general, because it seems like there's just so many topics that are topical right now.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, totally. There's I feel like we could make a million podcasts about what every single day of news. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
One day of news, there's like a million stories that we could potentially, follow or talk about.
Yeah, so I guess if anybody has a radio signal that wants a morning show, maybe we could pivot to that.
Yeah, right? I know. Yeah. It's crazy.
So much going on. Middle of a campaign for governor right now, springtime here in New Hampshire, and the weather's not super sexy right now. It's still kind of chilly, windy, cold. A lot of the ski hills around the state are closing down. A lot of the maple syrup farms, they're just pretty much finishing their production because it's too warm now. And it's just in this big in-between. What kind of generally happens in New Hampshire this time of year? I'm new to New Hampshire as of 7 months ago, so I don't know what happens.
Mud season. That's it.
Okay.
That's what they call it up north. It's not as bad around here, but yeah, it's big mud time.
So is that like you need to go out and get special footwear and or just?
Well, I think it's more just your truck's gonna be dirty driving down those dirt roads, and man, the potholes this year have been some of the worst. I think just because of a lot of freezing and thawing, but it's been brutal.
Yeah, I mean, I know from reading your book, Community First Economics, that housing is a very big thing for you. And with some of the pothole sizes around the area, you could probably build some nice communities in those potholes alone and help with the housing crisis that's happening in New Hampshire.
Yeah, you're not wrong. It's pretty brutal. Yeah.
It's definitely been treacherous, to say the least, to travel around. And a hard winter is going to do that. And you and I have talked outside of the podcast about global climate change and just the transition of what this life looks like moving forward and how weather in this area has changed dramatically over even the last 3 decades. Zoom out trillions of billions of years of the planet. But even though just from the data we have of tracking climate change in this area, things are getting windier, things are getting warmer at different times, colder at different times, and all of that change means that we need to kind of be paying a lot more attention to those things at the state level, at the local level, and at the federal level. There's just a lot that we need to be conscious of at all times.
Yeah, man, the environment is one category that's sort of taken a hit for sure in terms of just advocacy over the last, Trump years, since the last 10 years. It seems like they almost gave up, pushing for that. And, Democrats and obviously Republicans aren't at all. But it seems like it's something that sort of fell out of favor as a conversation piece. And I think that we really need to bring it back because, thinking, being someone that wants to think 50, 100 years ahead, I think it's really important that we imagine what sort of world we're leaving to our children. And, what can we do now to continue to advocate for better energy policies, cleaner energy. I'm a big fan of nuclear. My dad was a nuclear engineer at Seabrook over down the road. And I will say, I do see some positive things happening on the horizon, with environmental stuff. China has gone big on solar and batteries and electric cars. Australia just did a big push installing batteries and solar panels all over the place, thousands of them. It was a government-funded program because they just wanted their grid to be more resilient, So what's a better way to do that than to make each house have its own, power generation system and battery to back that up when, the sun's not shining.
Yeah, I with the home renovation that I've been doing, we put solar on our house in December, and we got in right before the federal tax credit ended, that the Trump administration ended.
Yeah.
They said, we don't want renewable energy. We want big oil to keep making trillions of dollars off of our economy and stuff. We thought it as a push. We needed a new roof. The roof was 35 plus years old, and it was like, you know what? If we have the opportunity to do this now, this could set us up for the long term. And our solar panels went on our roof on December 26th.
Wow. Yeah.
So, I mean, we got in 5 days before the close of it.
Literally,
But the solar generation that we're seeing just last month in March, it was still snow on the roof. It was still cloudy. That's what happens this time of year. And we still overproduced kilowatt hours beyond what any consumption that we had the previous 5 months.
Yeah.
So we're already seeing the benefits of it.
That's great.
And so like, I am a big advocate for those type of renewable energy sources. And I think the more that from the governor's office and local town policies that anybody out there can do to bring up the topics of renewable energy, I think it's very important.
Yeah, I think, this war in Iran is obviously terrible. It's causing a lot of suffering for the people in Iran and the people in the Middle East in general. And it's going to cause suffering globally, because of not just petroleum products not getting out of the Strait of Hormuz, but fertilizer and things like that. But the one positive thing that I think potentially could happen from this is that all these countries are going to say, hey, we don't want to be dependent on an energy source from an unreliable place like the Middle East. We need to go solar, big time, wind, nuclear, I think is going to come back. I think all these countries in Asia particularly are getting hit really hard. Thailand, Indonesia, gas shortages. Australia has really seeing some shortages of diesel. I think they're going to embrace renewables just so hard. You know what I mean? I think it's going to be a whole new day. I think people are going to look at this and say, all right, oil is just not a reliable energy source. I mean, it never has been, but we've never been in this, at least in our lifetime, have been in this situation where it was literally, turning the tap down by 20%, and it's going to cause massive problems.
Yeah, I think we're both of that age where those fuel crises of the 60s and 70s were before our time. But you see film from those times with the long lines outside the pumps and different things like that. It's been brought through popular culture, media throughout the years. So we didn't experience those. But I do remember when I turned 16, going to the gas pump, and it was like under $1 a gallon to get fuel. But then I do remember what happened on September 11, 2001, September 12th, where gas prices tripled, quadrupled all over because everyone was uncertain of what could happen. And that was kind of, to me, that first glimpse of what a global energy crisis could be. And I think now, 25 years since then, we're seeing that, hey, because of things like solar, wind energy, plenty of other types of renewable energy sources, nuclear, as you said, the emphasis should be stronger locally now, because it doesn't make sense to me to wait for a ship to leave through the Strait of Hormuz, come all the way around, go to an American port, and then find its way to a refinery and then get refined and then make it to the gas. That seems like that liquid is going through way too many hands and way too many containers and does not seem viable to the future of the world.
And something people should know is that the United States produces a lot of oil right now. We're the biggest producer of oil. However, the type of oil that the U.S. produces is not the type of oil that the refineries in the U.S. can actually refine, in the most part. We have this mismatch because of when the refineries were built. It was mainly, I think, heavy crude that was being refined. And what the U.S. is producing through the shale fracking is light crude. And long story short, we have to basically send our oil somewhere else to refine it and then bring in oil. And the refineries just take a long time to build. They're very expensive. So the oil companies are reluctant to, change them over. So long story short, oil is a global commodity. You might say, oh, well, why would it matter if there's less in the Middle East? Because the U.S. is pumping our own. We can't use our own straight out of the well or whatever. So I think all the more reason to look at this system of energy and then the food system that sort of
is tied to
it as both being so fragile and we just spread everything so wide that it was bound for something to happen where people are going to go, wait, this is not what we want. And sustainability is something that I've been talking about with people for decades, and sometimes it takes a situation like what we're in right now to go, oh, we need to prepare. We need to make our systems more sustainable, more able to deal with international, crisis, and we don't want a food system that is relying on the entire world being at peace, which is just what we're kind of at right now.
Yeah, the military-industrial complex does not necessarily lead to the creation of global peace, let alone stable food and energy globally. Yeah. There's just too many people that think that they're entitled to something that's going to probably not make that work too well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, it's one of the most frustrating things that I have experienced, I think, in the last couple of years. I mean, I've been really disappointed with the Democrats. I think a lot of people, the elected Democrats in Washington, and the way that they've been reacting to Trump or not reacting to Trump. But this war in Iran is kind of brought to a new level because it's important to understand, for the last 40 so years, Israel has wanted to bomb Iran for 40 plus years. And they've gone to every president and they said, hey, let's bomb Iran. Every president before Trump said, no, this is a bad idea. Strait of Hormuz will get shut down. It'll cause economic crisis that we don't want to deal with. And finally, they found a sucker in Donald Trump. I heard a story that J.D. Vance recently called up Benjamin Netanyahu and was basically screaming at him saying, you said this would take 3 days. You said this would take a week for us to, overthrow Iran and it would be no big deal. And here we are. It's been a month. And really not, I would say, I don't feel like we're any closer to any sort of conclusion.
I think we're even farther from a conclusion because now I feel like the veil has been kind of lifted off of what the actual power that the American government had at a federal level to say like, oh, they're too powerful to take down. But now that these skirmishes keep getting longer and longer in the tooth, it seems to me that like we might not be as strategically strong as we once were. Though the war powers of just spending money to build up munitions and advance AI and do all of these things, they don't seem to be working. Like whoever had the idea in the first place, that idea doesn't seem very strong right now.
Yeah. And I mean, if you just look at the math of the Iranian drones versus the interceptors that we use to shoot them down, the drones cost anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000 a piece. The interceptors are millions of dollars. So you just do the math on that. If the Iranians can keep shooting these drones, it costs us tens of times more to shoot them down. The math doesn't work out.
Yeah, eventually you're going to go broke.
Yes, and not only that, but the interceptors take a long time, year plus to build, and a lot of the materials are, some of the materials anyway are harder to get now because of the shutdown of the Strait of Hormuz. So it's showing that the U.S. military, I think, has been built for a World War II style war. That's not what we're looking at anymore. I mean, I was just reading an article about how you ask yourselves, we spend billions, if not more, on the Navy. And the point of the Navy is to keep the shipping lanes functioning so that there's not pirates or, countries out there just robbing shipping containers off of ships.
Sure.
That's basically the point of the U.S. Navy is to police the waters. And they can't go into the Strait of Hormuz because it's so narrow that basically it would be very hard for them to get in there without getting into a lot of trouble. Because it's so close to the
yeah, exactly
to the ground. So you kind of have this massive navy that's in a lot of ways it's built for a different time, and it can't function with these drones and with these lower cost munitions. So and what really frustrates me is that we're getting into this war at a time when the country itself is at $39 trillion in debt that's probably going to be passed on to us and our children. Thank you. Thank you, people in charge. And then, the bigger issue to me is, we saw Chris Pappas, our legislator or our congressperson, in March 12th at an APEC fundraiser, he doubled down on his support for Israel, support for the war in Iran, saying it's what we got to do to keep the world secure, And I thought, that's the dumbest thing I've heard in a long time, because this war is not going to make anyone more secure. It's going to make the entire food supply insecure, the entire energy supply insecure. Like, the exact opposite thing of what you're saying is what's going to happen. And people have known this for 40 years. And I don't think Chris Pappas is a dumb guy. I don't. But you got to ask yourself, why is he defending this war? And again, at a time when, cities and towns are looking at their budget and they're having to lay off teachers. Claremont can't even afford to bus its football team to the other team's field, and the parents and the coaches have to drive the kids. Our roads are deteriorating, our dams, our bridges are deteriorating. We have record homeless people, in this country, and hungry children, and healthcare costs, and yet somehow we still have billions of dollars to spend on war in Iran that is going to cost us all in the long run. And I've never really, before this, there was always kind of this, I really wanted to look at the Democrats as the good guys. I really did. I wanted to be like, we're the good guys. We're on the right side. The Republicans are the bad side. And at a certain point, you hear someone like Chris Pappas say that, and you're like, it's like that meme where the guy's like, are we the bad guys? Because it's preposterous. I am one of these people where I just want to live in a logical, reasonable world, And frankly, that propels me into politics almost more than anything else, because I can't deal with the illogical nature of the way New Hampshire functions. And then on a bigger scale, I can't, that dysfunction in New Hampshire is sort of amplified on the federal level. And you just look at the whole system and you go, this is insanity. You know what I mean? Just like some of the basic functions of the government. Okay, we're spending half our budget on military, a military that spent 20 years in Afghanistan to surrender to the Taliban. We spent 19 years in Vietnam for what? Nothing. And it's like, we're spending all this money in the military industrial complex. Like, at least you would think we would have the most effective military in the world. But now a month into Iran, and we've spent billions of dollars, it doesn't seem like we're any closer to any. And at a certain point, you look at the whole thing, and you got to go, these people can't be this stupid. You know what I mean? But who's benefiting? The military-industrial complex is always sitting back there going, oh, you spent a bunch of millions of dollars or billions of dollars on missiles? Turns out now you got to buy some more from us.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like the expiration date on all of those munitions should be infinite, right?
Yeah.
But it seems like it only has a 15-year window at max before it's like, well, we got to point them somewhere.
Yeah.
And then we need to double down on not only what we've already used, but better have some more just in case.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's so crazy that in our adult lives, I mean, what year did you graduate high school?
I graduated high school in 2002.
All right, so I graduated in 01. But basically, our entire adult lives, the United States has been at war with Afghanistan, and Iraq, and then literally from when Biden, pulled the troops out of Afghanistan, and we still have some troops in Iraq, but let's just say we had 9 months of peace, and then the war in Ukraine sort of kicked up, and you look at this and you're like, it just seems like there is, when you have people profiting off of war. And then you have the campaign finance system, what it is. You have this war machine that just somehow, is able to kick up some sort of military action somewhere in the world to feed the machine. And it's really disheartening when it's not just Republicans, but Democrats that are getting sucked into this.
Yeah, I also want to zoom out a little bit and remind you that when we were playing Nintendo 64 and Sega Genesis when we were kids, Operation Desert Storm was happening during that time too.
Right, totally forgot about that. Yeah.
The majority of our entire lives, we have been all hands in on a global skirmish.
Yeah.
Like our whole lives, minus 1 to 2 year gaps here and there if you add them all up. It would be probably 3/4 of our life we have been at war with somebody else.
And is the world that a more peaceful place?
No,
do we fight this war to and
No.
And that's where it's very it's disheartening, and it really it makes me want to fight the system in a sort of even more rabid and a rabid and
tactical way.
Yeah, tactical way.
From talking to you and reading Community First Economics and understanding your messaging and who you are and how you're fighting for New Hampshire, it comes from the federal level because there's a lot of pressure being put on by the Fed right now for all of these things we've already talked about, just touching on here a handful of minutes into this podcast. But then from there, it's like, how do you translate it locally? But it seems like everyone that we've been electing for all these years and doing this, we need to finally say, stop. Like, who now as a candidate for governor, how do you say, I have an identity, I am Jon Kiper, I am running for governor, get behind me for this?
Yeah.
And what is that messaging, and how do you see that change happening now for your campaign?
So, we have really been in this we've had a goal from the get-go, and it was to get on the ballot in November. And how we got on the ballot was in some ways almost irrelevant. We just needed to get on the ballot in November. And so we initially set out running. I ran my campaign as an independent in the beginning of 2025, going into 26. And it's important to understand that when I first started running for governor in 2023, I wanted to run as an independent then. Because I have long felt that the United States needed a third political party to push the other two parties into a more, citizen-oriented position.
You could say we could have 10 parties, more options.
Yeah,
more
I've always
options.
thought that. And literally, when I was 19, I came up with this idea called the Washington's Ghost Party. I had this band that I was in called Washington's Ghost, and the idea was basically, if George Washington were to come back to the United States, he would just be appalled by the way that the country was running. And it's kind of funny because I was thinking about, I don't really know at 19 what I was really, what was I pushing back against? I think it was a lot of the surveillance state that they were implementing after 9/11 with the Patriot Act, and just like I could sort of see this global war on terrorism taking place. And at 19, I had this idea. It sort of just fizzled out, but it's really funny because that was really what I wanted to do, was running as an independent in the beginning. And people said to me, I talked to some of my state reps who were Democrats, and they said, look, you're going to get no traction as an independent. There's just no world there. There's no there. So just run as a Democrat. You'll get some media. You'll get some attention. And maybe run as an independent 2026. So I did that. And frankly, it worked out pretty well. We, for a very little amount of money, we got a little bit under 10% of the vote. We spent, frankly, $20,000 on marketing, which is not a lot compared to the other people spending millions.
That's nothing.
And one great thing about it, I just thought of this last night. One great thing about us not having raised a bunch of money is, like, let's say I'd raised $100,000 or $200,000 and still lost. We don't have to go to a bunch of donors and be like, look, we screwed up last time, but this time it's going to be different, Because that's something I hadn't thought about. And I was talking to someone who lost executive council race, and he was like, dude, I raised $500,000 and lost. Now I have to go back. Like, if I'm going to run again, I got to go back to these same rich people and go, oh, remember that 10 grand that you gave me that I basically burned, So we don't have to do that because we didn't raise a ton of money. So after, when I started running in 2025 for the race in 26, my initial intention was to run as an independent. It was. And a couple things happened. I talked to some Democrats who were basically saying, look, you really sound like a Democrat on the campaign trail. You align with us. And a couple of them said this funny thing. They were like, why don't you run as a write-in in the Democratic primary and then run as an independent in the general? And I was thinking about that. I'm like, yeah, that's not a bad idea. And one of the issues we were finding as an independent, there was a couple. The first one was people would say, well, you're an independent. And I had this idea about the New Hampshire Independent Party. And people were like, well, what does that mean? Are you just a libertarian? And I'm like, no. And they're like, well, do you support, gay rights or something? And I'm like, yeah, of course. So they had no idea what that meant. And frankly, I wasn't exactly sure where to go with that as well. Because I knew that the one thing that we had to do was I did not want to be a spoiler for the Democrats. So I was like, we need to have pitch to both sides of the political aisle, the right and the left. And so when the Democrats basically could not come up with a candidate, I was like, I want to be governor. I don't really care if I do it as an independent or as a Democrat, because if I do it as a Democrat, I could always get in there. If the Dem establishment doesn't help me, I could always just switch, become an independent after the election, or whatever. There's a lot of ways that I could do it. But and there was Mamdani won in New York City. That was definitely like a shock to me, and I think to a lot of people. And I began to think, oh well, maybe maybe we can reform the Democratic Party. Maybe Mamdani and people like me and Bernie and AOC are getting in there. Maybe there is a world that we can fix this party. And so I made this decision to pivot and start running as a Democrat. Now, it's also really important to understand one thing. The filing period for governor is in the first or second week in June 12th, I think it ends. So no one's really running for governor until the paperwork is filed in that week in June. Okay. Nobody. So in my opinion, I was like, if I'm running as a Democrat, as a write-in or an independent or whatever, it really won't be finalized until that point. Okay.
Yeah.
So
right before Flag Day.
Yeah. So we're doing. We're like, all right, we'll run as an independent, we'll run as a Democrat, and it was really funny because one of the issues we're having as an independent is when we're talking to donors and other independent groups like Forward Party. They say, well, who's a Democrat? Who are you running against? And I'd say, well, there isn't anyone. They say, well, call us when there is one. So I was like, all right, well, then I'll just be the Democrat if that's, And so I started running as a Democrat. And then the funny thing was the donors and these same people are like, well, who are you running against in the primary? And I was like, well, there is no one. And they were like, well, call me when you know who there is, because and I was like, this is crazy. And not only that, but like if you look at the dynamics of the governor's race in particular in New Hampshire, Kelly Ayotte's on her first term. Statistically, almost every single governor, Republican or Democrat, has won a second term, aside from Craig Benson, who didn't. He was the only one in like 100 years.
Because, again, me being a new homeowner here in New Hampshire, the governor is only elected for 2 years.
2 years, yeah.
Again, that's a little silly to me.
It is.
It should, 4 years makes pretty much a lot of sense, but I don't know the history 100% why it's only 2 years. But that also makes sense that if you just campaigned and you got elected once, you're probably going to get elected again.
Yeah. So
unless you do some pretty horrible things that make people not want to vote for you anymore.
Yeah. And that's where I was like, all right, the Democrats can't come up with a candidate because no one wants to do this race because they're just going to lose. I'll get in it. And maybe I won't win, but I think I have a better chance than a lot of the establishment Democrats because I think I can win these Republicans. And this was just from conversations I'd had in the last campaign. Some Republicans, just they appreciated some aspects of my message. And so I thought, well, and also I kind of thought, maybe Kelly Ayotte will get tied with Trump, the economy will go down, and I will, win just because she's getting tied with Trump, and Republicans are just generally considered, not good at running the economy. So that was kind of all going through my head as I transitioned.
But they think in their own head that they're the best at running the economy.
I know. Yeah, it's so frustrating. So then, we made this pivot to run as Democrats, and basically, a lot of the people who had said, "Oh, you should run as a Democrat," just vanished. It did not show up to donate or endorse or really help at all. And, it became very apparent that the Democrat establishment, the leadership, did not care about my candidacy, did not want to even give me the time of day at all. And part of this had to do with the fact that back in February, I ran last February, obviously, a year ago from February, I ran against Ray Buckley for chair. And I was running for chair of the party because no one else wanted to do it because there's not a lot of leadership in the Democratic Party, frankly. And
at the state level.
At the state level. So Ray Buckley is the chair of the New Hampshire Democratic Party. I ran against him. And in this run, I said a lot of things out loud that he didn't want to hear, but that were true. And that basically the Democrats have been losing in New Hampshire since he took over, and we need new leadership. Now, I thought, okay, and this is very naive. I thought that with Trump winning, with Kelly Ayotte winning, so Joyce Craig lost by 10 points, or almost 10 points. I thought with all that, that the Democrats in New Hampshire, the leadership and the rank and file would go, hey, we need to go a different route. We need to include, more people. We need to have more working class people participating so that we can win these voters. We don't want to alienate people. We just need a bigger tent. We need a rebrand, if you will, of the Democratic Party.
Let's put a new sign on the building.
Let's clean it up.
Let's get some
younger folks,
let's get some
new
vibes
faces in here. And I thought that's what was going to happen. I thought everyone would be united in, hey, we've got to fight Trump, we got to fight MAGA, and in New Hampshire specifically, we've got to fight the Free State Project. Oh, was I wrong? They did not care about my candidacy at all. And it was not just like, I expected them to be ambivalent, I guess. But it was actually worse than that. This is an anecdote. So there's a woman who was our local Rockingham County chair. And I was really pretty good friends with the former chair of the Rockingham County Dems, Matt Stover was his name. And I would text him all the time, and we would talk, and we would chat, whatever. So I found out who the chair was, and the way that it works when you're running as a Democrat candidate is you contact the people that run the county and the town meetings, and you meet with them, and you meet with whoever's in that town. So you have to schedule these different meetings, and it's a lot. It's like 100 plus, different organizations. So it's very complicated. So you really early want to get all these dates on the calendar. And this is something that that there was no group of independents meeting to do stuff like that. I was like, this is the biggest benefit of being a Democrat is I have these meetings that I can go and meet with people. So I texted this woman and I said, hey, I'm running for governor. Look forward to sitting down to chat with you. And what I wanted was just a date on the calendar. And she never got back to me. Okay, fair enough. And then I texted her a picture, a GIF or a whatever, JPEG of the graphic that was announcing my campaign launch. And this was in November. And I said, hey, love to, you should come down or something like that. And she responded with all caps, stop, S-T-O-P. Now, if you don't know this, you type stop in when you're getting spam email.
Oh, yeah.
Okay?
Spam,
that's how you get
text messages.
Yeah, text messaging. Sorry, not email. When you're getting spam text messages. So she thought that I had put her on our text message list, okay? Now think about this for a second. Chair of the Rockingham Democrats. I am the only candidate running for governor. I'm a Democrat in Rockingham County, and I'm it. I'm the only candidate running for governor. And she doesn't want to get regular updates, and that's not even what it was, but she doesn't even want to get regular communication from the only candidate for governor. And this was like right off right at the beginning of the campaign. And I was like, wow. And we had this heated email back and forth because I actually made a TikTok video. I didn't name her or even say what county I was in because I was trying to leave some room. But somehow she saw this video and was like, blah, blah, blah. And she literally said, I don't know why you think you're entitled to volunteers' time. And I was like, I'm just trying to schedule a meeting. I don't know how else to do that. And she said, don't text me, just email me. So I emailed her, right? And then she responded with a text message. And I was like, I don't know what to do. Am I allowed to text you back? And the text message came at like 11 p.m. and it sounded like she was hammered. I would, whatever. But I'm like, and this is just the dysfunction of the Democratic Party that I had hoped they had recognized and would move on from, and that this type of thing wouldn't happen, that we're going to all coalesce around winning, right? So now I can't even make a meeting with the only Rockingham, county chair. And I'm like, and that was the first indication that things were not going to go well with the Democrats. But as we continued to, plot along, there was just constantly these people, Declan McEachorn, Donovan Fenton, and then Cindy Wormington, who kept saying, oh, we might run. We're going to run. They would whisper this. And people would say, oh, well, you've got all this time to decide if you're going to run. And I'm like, no one has ever won the Democratic Party starting after January, except for, has ever won the governor's race, except for Jon Lynch. And he beat Craig Benson, who was like the most unpopular governor ever, who didn't win a second term. And Lynch had a ton of money, and he got in late, but he had set himself up by writing a lot of op-eds critical of Craig Benson. So I knew the numbers. I said, if someone's not in by January, they're not going to win. And so, and this was by January. I was like, there's no one else except me, guys. And still, me being the only candidate, they're like,
no time of day, no nothing. Okay.
Yeah.
This seems like so much to unpack. Like
Yeah.
I this is a great podcast that I'm excited to be on, but this is going to be a 6-hour podcast if we keep going down this, just because it seems all of this has been happening with the county, state Democratic Party not giving your candidacy any validity.
Yeah.
What do you do now?
So, we've run into, just like I said, there was roadblock after roadblock after roadblock that were just put up by the Democratic Party.
Sure.
And so I got to this point where I was like, I made this very clear in a number of tweets I put out, another TikTok video. I said, look, if anyone else runs in this primary who is got a lot of money and a lot of connections with the party, they're going to beat me, and I'm not going to lose in another primary, and I'm not going to do that. And what do you know? Of course, Cindy Wormington decides that she's going to run. And it's kind of funny because I think she only was starting to run because Kelly Ayotte at the time was getting hammered for an ICE facility that was proposed in Merrimack. And I think Cindy thought she could just run this whole campaign on that. And Kelly Ayotte, to her credit, got the ICE facility, pulled the plug on it.
Yeah, because that's going to be ammunition, for use of a better term, for her when it does come election time for her campaign to say, don't you remember when I shut down the ICE facility?
Yeah.
You better vote for me.
Yeah. So, and she's doing a pretty good job of trying to stay centrist, I will say. Kelly has done. She's vetoed some bills that the Democrats, wanted her to veto, and she's, supported some that the Republicans have wanted. So she's been kind of right down the middle. So anyway, Cindy gets into this race, and the thing about this is something you got to understand. Cindy's husband is on the committee for the New Hampshire Democratic Party, and her boss is Billy Shaheen. She works for Shaheen Gordon, and Billy Shaheen's also on the board. And Billy Shaheen is Jean Shaheen's wife, our senator, current one.
Husband.
So our husband, yeah. So she's just connected to the party in a way that I will never be, right? And so it got to this point where I'm like, even if I was to beat her, right? What are the chances these people are going to help me? You know what I mean? And then there was two things that happened. One, there was a poll that came out, and it said that I only had 4% support in voters over 65. And she had about 50%. So about half of them were undecided. But the issue is that voters over 65 are the primary voters in primaries, right? They're a big voting bloc. And I've said this for a while, that primaries are where progressive dreams go to die, because young people just aren't turning out. I mean, I had hoped that young people were going to turn out for me in 2024. And they just didn't. It was tough. It was really defeating. But It's a terrible time. Yeah.
Yeah. So young parents,
yeah.
College students, anybody in those demographics, they're arguably in one of the most stressful, busy. Like, I need to set a routine for my family.
Yeah.
I can't just pivot and go vote in the middle of the day when I have all this other stuff happening.
Yeah. Exactly. So ultimately. I was like, there's no way I can win this primary. Like, I mean, sure, if I had $1 million, I could. But Cindy Wormington, she put $1 million of her own money in it last time. She'll probably do that again. There was that incident, and then
so she doesn't have to go to those donors that you were talking about earlier and say, "Well, give me more money. I lost last time."
She could just use her own money. She probably will use a lot of her own. We'll see. I'm sure that she's probably raised some money, but and then the other thing as I was talking about earlier was just seeing Democrats like Chris Pappas double down on this war with Iran.
Sure.
And I saw these two things, and I was like, you know what? I don't have to deal with these people anymore. I don't want to deal with them. I don't want to be on Team Democrat anymore. I don't want to vote blue no matter who, because that doesn't apply to progressives like Mamdani. And so this has really been the plan the whole time. I'd hoped to be a Democrat. I really wanted to be, because the alternative is very hard. And it's frankly going to be a lot of work and very painful. But I'm excited to announce that we are starting our own party. It's going to be called the Community First Party. And, I didn't write this book with the intention of turning it into a platform for a party. I didn't. In fact, political party is not mentioned in this book at all.
No, it's not.
It's just straight ideas about philosophy over economics, about economics and the government. And so it was kind of funny because the book was done, and I was like, wow, Community First Party would be a pretty good party name. So here's our plan now. We've set up the Community First Party in terms of website and that sort of thing. I need 3,000 signatures on these special forms that we're going to then submit to the state. and then I get to be on the ballot as an independent for governor. Now, if we get 4% of the vote in the general election, then we have our own party. And that means that when you go to vote in 2028, there'll be a Democrat, there'll be a Republican, and there will be a community first party at the time.
So it's like, I remember from voting throughout my life that like Green Party or insert other party.
Occasionally they would be there.
They would have earned that party,
ballot access.
Ballot access.
Yeah.
Okay.
So ballot access for independent campaigns is like the whole thing. You need ballot access.
Right. That's going to be pretty hard to win a write-in campaign.
Yeah.
Anywhere, anytime.
Yeah. And so this is now our goal. And the great part about this goal is it's much more, I think, manageable because the reality is, as I've said, Kellyanne is likely to get reelected. Now, I do think there's a chance we could win, particularly in a three-way race where we only need 34% of the vote. I think we potentially could, if we play our cards right and fundraise properly, we could beat Cindy and Joyce.
Kelly
and Cindy. But again, we have a backup plan if that doesn't work, which is just getting the 4%, getting ballot access, and then setting ourselves up for a slate of candidates in 2028 that will really be pushing community first. And what is really the important aspects of our party? The number one is that we want candidates who are going to be putting forth and voting for legislation that is going to be community first. That's going to be affordable housing, good public education funded by state and federal money. We should talk more about how the feds should fund more, fund education better. It's fighting for affordable housing. It's fighting for affordable health care. It's fighting for just basically putting more money in the pockets of people in your community. That's our number one priority of the Community First Party. Now, we have some other very mild stipulations if you want to be part of our group. The second one is no hate. We don't hate people, okay? And that was specifically because you say, hey, we want to create this bigger umbrella, a bigger coalition, but who do we exclude and how do we decide who's not in? And it's basically Nazis. We don't want Nazis here. And so we don't do any hating of people. The third thing is that we don't take money from any groups that would try to influence our message. So we don't take money from AIPAC. We don't take money from any political action committee or any donor individual who's going to say, as some have said to me, don't talk about taxing the rich. I've had donors say that to me. If you want the money, don't say tax the rich. Don't talk about global warming. Don't talk about bipartisanship. So these are conversations that are happening. So we don't take money from people that influence us. And the last thing is, and this is really important, is we fight for democratic reforms such as ranked choice voting, and more specifically in New Hampshire, paying the state reps, I think lowering the number of state reps, and just modernizing the entire way that legislation happens in New Hampshire. Because if you pay attention to what happens in Concord, it is a shit show. It's a mess. Procedurally, if you talk to the state reps up there, they will tell you it's very hard to get anything done. And so this all needs to kind of be reformed. So those are really our four things: community first legislation. Number two is we don't hate anybody. Number three is we don't take money from people that will try to influence us. And the last one is democratic reforms. And that's what we're trying to build, this bigger tent that will attract not just people on the left, but disgruntled Republicans who want to go to a party that is not in favor of sending billions of dollars to the Middle East, that wants to focus on New Hampshire and the United States and building up our communities so that we are resilient and so that we're ready for the tumultuous economic times that are coming and that are probably only going to get worse with things like climate change and AI is going to change a lot of things for the economy.
It's a lot. It's very exciting though, because I am right there with you that I feel like the times that we are in right now are a necessity of change. And this two-party system that we've been pulled back and forth with, the pendulum just swings one way or the other. It goes way far right, then it comes far left. Sometimes it swings in the middle, but it'll get steam and it'll keep swinging back and forth. Why does it only have to run on one axis?
Yeah.
Why can't we have, the world is in 3D. Why does it have to be linear?
Yeah.
Why can't we have nuance? Why can't we understand that so many things in this world are on a spectrum? And as we meet people and as we talk to people, we need to understand that there's way too many things that connect us and far fewer things that separate us. And when those separation points are narrowed in on and hammered in by the media and by politicians, it just makes us want to have angst and hate against each other. And your no hate policy is a pretty good idea, in my opinion. And if we can find a way to create a party that is open to everyone, that wants to care about our local communities, I'm in. I'm excited for this.
Yeah, I think it's going to be great to give people an alternative. And I think just to give a little historical context, what has happened in the past in the U.S. system? Because frequently they'll say, oh, it's a two-party system. You got to pick one of the two parties. It's always been a two-party system. And that is not really accurate. Third parties in the United States have been very influential, but they didn't always win. And a really good example is the Liberty Party, which was formed in the 1800s because it was a group of people that wanted to abolish slavery altogether. And they were a little too early. There wasn't quite enough momentum at that point to abolish slavery. So they didn't get a lot of success at the polls, at the elections. And they were then followed by a group called the Free Soil Party that was actually formed partially in New Hampshire. And they weren't for full abolition of slavery. They just didn't want slavery in the new states that were being formed in the West. And they got even more momentum than the Liberty Party did. And so they were building this bigger coalition and bigger coalition and bigger coalition. And then the Republicans, which did not exist as a party prior, around 1850, said, hey, these guys have got momentum. Let's build an even bigger coalition, and we're going to get rid of slavery once and for all. And they went from building the party to 6 years later, Abe Lincoln was their first president, and they went on to abolish slavery. And what happened was the two parties that existed before that were the Whig Party and the Democrats, and neither one wanted to address slavery because they were both getting votes from the South and the North. So they were both mixed. So, it's really important for people to understand the three outcomes that could happen, because I think this is just a really neat way to tidy it up, to finish it up. There are three outcomes, basically. Number one is this Community First Party fizzles out the way many other third-party attempts have fizzled out in the past. Maybe we don't get enough signatures, maybe we don't get on the ballot, we don't get the 4%, whatever. It just fizzles out. The second option is that the ideas are popular, we gain some momentum, and one of the two parties says, whoa, these guys are onto something, and they just steal our platform. This has happened in the past. A lot of progressive ideas were championed by third parties, the Progressives or the People's Party, and the Democrats ended up basically just stealing their ideas.
Sure.
Which is fine with me. If the Democrats or the Republicans were to steal my platform, I would be happy for that to happen because I just want the ideas out there. I just want my community to be put first. And that's what I was hoping would happen with the Democrats, is that they would say, oh, this guy's got this whole plan about community first economics, but they were not interested. That's fine. And then the third possibility is, and this is much more rare, but like I said, it happened to the Whigs around slavery, is that one of the two parties basically implodes and then is replaced by a new party. And so that's a possibility as well if we have a lot of success. But that will likely take 10 years. And I want to address some of the reasons why I didn't want to do this. And I want to be clear. I wanted to run as a Democrat. I was hoping that would, because it's just easier. But also, we are going to be putting ourselves in the potential of spoiling some Democrat races. I'll be honest, we will. But I likewise would like to spoil some Republican races. I want to we want to have community first politicians running in Republican strongholds so that we can potentially, win in a place where a Democrat couldn't win. And likewise, we might want to put a candidate into a place where it goes either way. And maybe we don't want to put some candidates in some places so that we're, leaving the Democrats alone in certain regions of the state, let's say, where maybe we couldn't win anyway. So we're trying to be calculated about this because I don't want to be a spoiler for the Democrats. It's not the intention. But the point is, at this stage, there's so little difference between the Democrats and the Republicans, particularly in New Hampshire. And I want to say that it's particularly in New Hampshire. Because I will say on the national stage, some state Democratic parties are a little bit more open to working class candidates, are a little bit more open to change, not the Democrats in New Hampshire. And frankly, if you look at Cindy Warmington's platform, aside from the social issues of abortion, LGBTQ, and guns, she doesn't want to present any new revenue. She doesn't want to solve the primary issue of our day, which is public school funding. And neither party wants to deal with that. And so that's where I'm saying we've got to deal with it. And if I'm the only politician running for governor that's saying we need to deal with this issue, I think we're going to get a lot of traction.
So with the new Community First Party, how do people find out about it?
Good point. cfparty.org. cfparty.org. I was so psyched to get a 7-digit URL. But yeah, it's live. You can check out our website. You can sign up and become a member of the party. And we're going to need help knocking doors and getting signatures. So please join us.
So you need 3,000 signatures.
Yep.
So cfparty.org. You also have your votekiper.org website.
Yep.
And you have the book's website at communityfirsteconomics.com.
Yep.
So if anybody wants to read the book, to learn about the party's ideas, you can do that. Then go to cfparty.org. You could sign up. Or if you want to donate to the campaign in general, or sign up to be a volunteer, or do anything, you can go to votekiper.org. So 3 different websites. We'll put those all in the podcast description. This is the time where we need to say, like, hey, start sharing this, start commenting, start getting the word out, because that's how change is going to happen. This needs to start spreading and growing.
Grassroots campaigns require people like you to spread the message, okay? I don't want to take a bunch of money from millionaires and billionaires. I don't want to do that, right? I don't want to take money from PACs that can control our message, like I said. We don't want to do that. But for us to be successful without taking that money, we need your help. And you don't have to donate necessarily. The bigger help is just spreading this message online and in your life, you know, with your friends and your neighbors. Say, hey, are you tired of the 2-party system? Because we are, and there's now an alternative. So you don't have to vote for the lesser of 2 evils when the Community First Party is on the ballot, which will be 2028.
Awesome. Thanks for watching the Jon Kiper Show podcast, listening to it if you're on your favorite streaming platform, and come back soon for another episode.